Well, hello people. It's a couple of days after Christmas. I hope everyone had a good Christmas. And as you can see, we're downstairs in the basement shop. And we are getting started on the Winter Project series. Now, back in August, late August, first part of September, I spent some money and I bought supplies for the first 3 or 4 projects, and I'm kind of glad I did with what happened with the vandalization and stuff after Halloween, because I wouldn't have had the money to buy supplies. So I've got 4 or 5 projects I can work on. All of them are going to be wrapped around foam and foam carving. I've got 3 new patterns to make up. One of them is for Sue Ann's display, the new one. It had the huge pumpkin pile, the scarecrow, and all the tubes that you had to push through. That was the one we put in to replace the corn. That one this year, we use 3 different patterns of wall panels in that one, leftovers from the other displays. Well, with this vlog, we are going to be making a custom-made set of panels. That is going to be Winter Project Series 1. Further on during the winter, once this project is done, the skim panels in the water room are going in the trash, and we're making a whole brand new set for that. Same way with the photo hall. That's going to be another one. We're going to be remaking panels for that. And then we're going to get the chain hall panels in here, and we're going to redo those a little bit. The panels are staying the same, but we're going to be maintaining the lighting on them. So we've got 4 projects all having to do with pink foam. Now with this one, I've already got a few started, but it mimics the panels we have in our courtyard, which were the gray brick with the ram's heads on them. This one, we went with smaller brick, and we decided to do pumpkins on them. And right now, I've got about 9 or 10 of them sketched out. Takes about an hour to sketch that out. And believe it or not, these pumpkins take a half hour to do. But once they're all carved and painted, we're going to poke some poke some holes in the eye sockets here, and we're going to put LEDs in here. We're going to be doing flickering green LEDs. So these panels will be like the courtyard and the chain hall, and will be pre-lit. That will help me in the long run. I won't have to put lights in that display. I will just have more panels to wire up. But anyway, it's been a couple of years since I've done a kind of a how-to on how I do the panels. So what we're going to do is in this vlog, you're going to have a ton of fast-forward footage. I've got my tripod out. We're going to get the camera set up. And right now, I'm going to shoot you some fast-forward footage on just one panel, this panel, of how I lay the pattern out. So you'll see from the start to the end. So, hold on. Here we go, guys. hour later, and we've got another panel done. Get up a little closer, you can see it a little bit better, but you can see the pumpkins, chain of pumpkins going down the center. And there's 15 pumpkins. Each one is going to get 2 LEDs in the eyes, so it'll be 30 LEDs in those panels. Now, something I really didn't cover before I started was what I am using to make the pattern. First off, Sue Ann and I talked about what we wanted to do. And we both agreed we wanted to mimic the cemetery panels. Or not cemetery, but the courtyard panels with the ram's head on them. But we wanted to switch it up. On the cemetery panels, we have the pumpkin boxes would be over here on the outside edge, and then the center was a field of brick. This time we switched it up. We also decided we wanted smaller brick on it. The other ones had fairly large brick pattern on it. And so we changed it up, and then we decided to use a pumpkin. I sketched out a pattern on a piece of poster board, and Sue Ann and I went over and kind of messed around with it, dressed it up, and got my measurements off of that, and then just started laying out the foam. Now to lay out the pattern on the foam, it's fairly straightforward. It's basically using a ruler and a Sharpie to do the brick. And then I went and printed out a picture of the pumpkin that we wanted to use. I went out, used some spray glue, and attached it to a piece of clear plexiglass, and then cut it out. And that I'm using as a stencil, to do the pumpkins. Now, the sanding block here, and I did make a mistake on this one. When I was drawing this line across here for the brick, I went through the box where the pumpkin was, and I didn't want an ink line in there. So we're using the sanding block basically as an eraser. We just lightly go over the foam so we don't gouge into it to remove that line that I created. And it seems like just about every panel I do a goof somewhere along the lines. So the sanding block does get used just about every panel. But that's how we lay out the pattern. Now, I've got 40 of these I've got to do, plus 6 more that we're going to be using, cutting in half and using as a 1-foot panel. And that will be a slightly different pattern on it. Or basically, on the ones that are going to be 1-foot panels, we're not going to do the pumpkin, we're just going to do a solid field of brick. So I've got a lot of this to do. Once we get all this done, we get into carving. I'll give you some fast forward footage of the carving. Now that the layout is done, it's time to do some carving. And I've been doing some carving. In fact, I've gotten 20 panels out of the 40 done. And here's the finished product. This is stage 1 of the carving. This is the front side. This is what people are going to see. I still have some carving on the back side to do, to allow for the wiring for the LED lights. And I'll go into that, when we get into it. But for right now, I still got 20 more panels like this that need to be carved. I got one up on the table ready to go. And yes, you'll get some fast forward footage of that. And it's a 2-step process. First off, it's the carving. And what I'm using is a Dremel with the plunge router attachment on it. And the bit I am using is this here. It's an 1/8" grout removal bit. And I know, for some of the bigger areas, like out here, or here, let's go here on this one here. Like this area here on the panel, I could use a bigger bit. The problem is I'd be wasting a lot of time switching in and out from the larger bit to that smaller bit, so I could get in here and do like the grout lines, or the eyes and the mouth, or around the pumpkin and the stem. I'd be changing bits a lot. And when you got 40 panels to do, and you've got 15 pumpkins per panel, going up and down and what have you, that's a lot of time wasted changing bits in and out. So I just stick to one bit. And this 1/8" grout bit is what I use. It works really, really good for doing the grout lines and for up here. Now, once the carving's done, I've got another step I've got to do, and that's sanding. I do it for a couple of reasons. Uh, well, I've already sanded these, so you really can't see. But there's been a couple of spots, like along the grout line or on the face, where I don't get rid of the Sharpie line. So that little bit of black shows. And since these are going to be painted, it's, you would think, it's no real big deal. But any little flaws or anything in the foam do show through the paint, and means you have to put on several coats. I don't like having to do several coats unless it's absolutely necessary. Also, I showed in an earlier segment the writing that's done on the back of the panels. Some of them got wet and the ink has rubbed off on the face of the panels. I have found if I don't get that ink off, the paint doesn't like to stick very well and will eventually peel off a lot quicker. So sanding removes the ink as well and gives you down to a more foam finish. Also, sanding, for the main reason why I do it, for more than anything, roughens up the surface of the foam. If you leave it smooth with a smooth skin on it, the paint will adhere, it will dry, and if it gets wet, it tends to want to flake off. It lets loose from the foam. If you sand it, give it more of a rougher surface, the paint tends to grab onto it and hold on onto the panel a little bit more. And so there's some reasonings. So I've got to go through here with the Dremel and my 1/8 inch. What did I do with it? There it is. It rolled in with my 8 inch grout bit. Carve out the pattern. Then I got to come back through with the sanding block and sand them. Then I can set the panel aside and do the next one. It takes a while to carve one of these panels. I have not timed it yet. So doing the fast forward footage would help. Will help with that, or let me get an actual time on it. Figure we'll start this segment with a little bit of Kaylee. She hasn't been in this year's log yet. I just got done doing some blowing down there and had to come over and check things out. Stage 1 of carving is done. I just got done with what will become the 1-foot panels. Right now this is a 2-foot panel. And after I get everything painted on it, I got to run it through the table saw and we're going to cut it in half. This way making 2 1-foot panels. I've got 6 of these panels, so I'll have 12 1-foots altogether. And the foam panels I used when I was going through originally cutting the height off of, I had a bunch that had some damage on them. So I set them off to the side. I think I'd use those as a 1-foot panel. Now, I got to get cleaned up in here, down here, and get set for the next spot. We got to get stage 2 of the carving done, and it's a 3-part process, so hold on. Well, major step done. We got all the initial carving done. And this is, I already showed you what they look like, and I mentioned about the next step. But normally, when I get this part done, they head out to the shop and we start the paint. But with this set, we are going to start prepping the panels for doing lighting, which is a little bit more work. I am using an old soldering iron to melt holes for where I want the LEDs. In this case, it's in the eye sockets of the pumpkins. I've got 15 pumpkins, 2 eye slots in each pumpkin, so that's 30 LEDs are going to go into this panel. So to start the process, I have to go through, melt all the holes in all the pumpkins. And then after that, on the back side of each panel, I have to go through and I'm doing some layout. You can see the holes here. That's the back side of the eye. That's where the LEDs pop through. All the wiring is going to be back here. Now I could just go and attach it to the surface of the foam. Problem is over time, between moving them and stacking them or hanging them or taking them down in the haunt, those wires would get rubbed and would eventually rip out and rip up the connections. So to prevent that, I've got to do a real shallow, what do I want to call it? I want to say groove. In this case here on the slant part, it would be a groove. But I've got to carve out a shallow trough for the wiring to sit in. And this, I'm doing the big box section here because that's where a connection is going to be. I got to attach the 2 LEDs to the lead that will eventually go out the top and become the power. So I need a little bit more room to do all my connections. And then the small channels here are where the wire is going to run all the way up to the top. And if you see up there, it's a real small channel. That's where they'll stick out of the tube. So I've got to get this laid out. That's what I'm working on now. It's fairly quick at this point to do this, to get the holes in and get the channel laid out. Once all that's done, then I got to turn around and carve. Well, here we go. I just got the last panel carved with the slot for the wiring and the LEDs. And I want to kind of cover it a bit. The depth that I'm cutting in here is important for two reasons. The first one is I need the wiring set just slightly lower than the surface of the foam. That way when I go to seal the wiring in later, which you'll see in a later segment, nothing sticks up out. If I have anything sticking up out, it will eventually get snagged and it will pull the lights out. So I want it sunk just a little bit. The other thing on the depth too, though, is you need to be careful. If you remember, I carved the other side of the foam. You don't want to go so deep into this that you're right next to that carving on the other side, because it will weaken the panel, and the panel will either fall apart or break real easy. So you need to be real careful with that. Okay, with that covered. Now, next step is getting these out into the shop, and we're going to start the paint process. Since a lot of what I'm going to be doing on this is going to be done by airbrush and stuff, I am not going to have the camera out there to show the process like I've done with all the other segments of this build. So we're going to do the paint process in pictures. You know, I'll get one color shot, take a picture, get another color shot, take a picture, and just work our way through that. And I'll put those up in order in the vlog. Now, you may end up seeing those pictures, because I'm debating once I get done of posting them up on Instagram and Facebook. So you may see them before the vlog comes out. But they are going to be part of the vlog. So anyway, I got a huge mess down here. And I got foam all over the place. It's underneath the table. It's on the table. Before I go out and start spraying, Sue, the wife, the set dresser, would like me to clean up. She's tired of seeing foam tracked all over the place. So I'm going to spend an hour or so getting things cleaned up. It needs it badly. Hey people, it's been a couple of weeks since we got the painting done on all the panels. I've got them all moved into the house. And the reason why it's been a couple of weeks is our last stage of this build has to do with the eyes on the pumpkins. If you remember right, I punched holes in them. And we're going to be inserting LED lights. Now, I went and did some math. I chose to build my own LED lights. Reason being, one, I enjoy it. I enjoy assembling LEDs. And two, cost. For this project, each panel has 15 pumpkins, 2 eyes per pumpkin. That means I need 30 LEDs per panel. I have 40 panels to do, which means I need 1,200 LEDs, one for each eye hole on each of the panels. Now, I could have saved a hell of a lot of time by simply buying pre-wired LEDs. Problem with that is the cost. Depending on what color you get, whether it's, the standard red, green, and blue, you can get for around 59 cents each. If you get into some of the more exotic colors, or the blinking or flashing or flickering or whatever you want to call them, LEDs, they tend to be a bit more. And we're using a flickering green LED. I checked prices on those, and they were averaging about 69 cents each. And to get enough LEDs to do the project, it would have ran me $828 to get 1,200 pre-wired LEDs. That's a heck of a lot more than what I want to spend. So I went on to eBay. I bought an LED, the LEDs, 1,000 of them. It ran me roughly, I want to say about $49 for 1,000 bulbs. Resistors were about half a cent each. The wiring I'm using on them for the leads are old wiring I used in the hunt. I always save the longer lengths. So the wiring didn't cost me anything. And then, to finish it off, I have two different sizes of heat shrink tubing, which I use on them as well. And man, I'm not even sure what that cost. 100-foot roll of that is about $9, you know, if that. And I went through 3 rolls of these versus, oh God, 1 roll of the 1/4 inch. Have 8-inch heat shrink and a 1/4 inch heat shrink. Got them all, time I added it all up and did the math, it came to $72 to do 1,200 LEDs, which is not bad, you know. Each of these bundles here holds 100, and I got 12 bunches over there. So I have enough LED spots, I guess you could call them, to do the whole project. And it took me just a little over 2 weeks to get them all assembled. That's what I've been doing the last 2 weeks. Now the next stage, I got 2 more stages to do. The next one is I've got to create a wiring harness for each panel to attach the LEDs. So I can just plug in 1 set of wires at the top of the panels and you know, plug them in, and then the whole panel lights up. This is going to take a while, and I will give you some fast forward footage of that process of wiring up just 1 panel. Now that the carving, the painting, and all the LEDs are assembled, it's time to get them installed, which is basically creating a wiring harness. Here's the back of the panel. I've gotten 13 wall panels done so far, and it's basically, I start at the bottom, I work my way to the top. And when I get to the top, my connections, well, there you go. I bundle up with the zip ties so they're not hanging loose and getting ripped out when I'm moving them around. It's some work. It takes about 1.5 hours to do 1 panel, to solder all the connections. There's literally 30 LEDs. There's 2 in each one of these boxes that have to be wired up and snaked up. Now to do the wiring harness, I'm using more speaker wire. I got my LEDs. I've got some heat shrink tubing for the connections. Definitely some solder and nippers and stuff. One thing I am doing, since I'm doing the connections as I install them, when you're doing soldering, you get some waste that drips off from time to time. Do not want to get that on the foam because it will melt a hole in the foam. So I'm using a piece of plywood with a soldering iron on it that I can just slide, you know, across the foam as I need it and do my connections. Now I'm going to give you some more fast forward footage. This whole vlog's got a lot of it. So sit tight and I'll show you the process of getting 1 panel done. Time-lapsed, of course. We are so close to the end on these. I've had half the panels finished for about a week now. I'm just now moving out the other half. I've been busy getting all the lights and the wiring and stuff into them, as you saw in the last clip. Now I'm ready for the last stage, and that is sealing the wiring and stuff in here. The tape on here is just to hold things into place until I get the last step done. Now what I'm going to be using is a silicone-based caulking. Dynaflex 230. And I'm using the clear color. When I'm doing this, I want the clear color. I've learned this the hard way. I've used white in the past and it's caused problems. But I got to take that caulking and fill in the space where the wiring chase. Now you got to do the whole panel. Now the caulking helps seal the wiring into place. It can be removed if I want to try to cut everything out. And then the reason I do the clear is because of the lights. If any of these get water in them and they short out, sometimes they'll arc a little bit and it'll discolor the clear caulking. And I can tell which light is bad or needs to be replaced just by looking at it. It makes it, for easier inspection for doing maintenance and stuff. So that's the main reason why I do the clear. But the caulking is basically just to kind of hold everything in. Now the tape I've got here is just little pieces of Gorilla tape to hold the wiring in. But I'm finding after a while the Gorilla tape tends to want to let loose from the foam, especially in areas where it's been carved. So the caulking kind of reinforces that too. And it does water protect it on the back. With the front being carved and painted, you can still, when they're laying down, you can still get water into where the eyes are. You don't have that problem when they're mounted in the haunt. But since I store these laying down and they're stored year-round out in the weather, I get a little bit of cooling sometimes. So like now I get ready to put these away out in the dump, I'll put them in upside down with this part sticking up. That way the water won't get into the eyes and cause rusting. So, but anyway, there you go. Next footage will be of me applying the caulk. Well, there you go. It's all cocked. It doesn't take long to caulk these. What does take the longest time right now is drying. You'll notice the caulking is showing up white right now, and as it dries, it turns clear. With it being chilly out here still, the shop's at about 50 degrees. It takes a couple of days. So what I'm going to do is I've got 4 more panels to do. I should get those done today. Now I'm going to leave these sit out here, and I've got them going clear into my storage locker for about a week, maybe 2. Depending when I get around to needing the shop for something else. But I'll let them sit out here. By the time I do get out here, they'll be dry and I'll be able to put them away. Which means the project is pretty much over. Except I gotta get that one and 3 more there done. And like I said, I'll be doing that today and they'll be done. So we can finally get this vlog uploaded. We do have another project lined up. I still had all that foam, pink foam panels sitting out that window on the patio. I've got 46 of those panels in the house. So guess what? We're doing more panels. But no lights in them. So it should be a fairly quick one. Doing these lights in these panels take forever. Anyway, I have no idea how long this vlog is. With all the fast forward footage. Probably going to be a long one. One of the ones like Diablo 85 likes. Jose! Shout out to you, my friend. Stay toxic. Stay spooky. Nah, we'll just go the old-fashioned way. Stay spooky. Stay toxic.